Jobsworth Season 1, Episode 6, Work, Wine and Wanderlust. Welcome to Episode 8 of Jobsworth. You actually get two guests for the price of one this time round, as I'm joined by Charlie and Sam Brown. Charlie and Sam are... Well, where do I start? Charlie and Sam seem to have had the very definition of a squiggly career. Between them, they've worked in engineering, recruitment, charities and tech startups. They've founded a business, built it, made it successful and then sold it, alongside all their worldly possessions, and are now freelance writers and app developers travelling the world as digital nomads. It's a label that is becoming increasingly more common and evokes a whole host of different opinions on what drives people to choose that lifestyle and what it's actually like to live it. Fortunately, we'll be discussing all that and more over the course of this episode. If you've ever wondered what it would be like to make the move away from traditional employment, then this episode is for you. The journey to get there isn't easy though. As well as the positives of this nomadic lifestyle, we talk about the challenges you may face, but more importantly, what it takes to overcome them. This is also for any business leaders listening that might be on the fence about introducing a work from anywhere policy. As you'll hear, it's far more common than you think. In conversations I had with friends about this episode, they've all been super excited to hear it, and trust me, it does not disappoint. Without further ado, it's my genuine pleasure to introduce you to two people that I know will force you to think very differently about your relationships with work. Charlie and Sam. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time to do this as well.
Yeah.
Thanks for inviting us.
Very welcome. I'm honoured that you could make the time as well. So before I ask the questions that I kind of want to go into straight away, and I'm going to have to sort of tone down my excitement because I feel like this conversation could go absolutely anywhere today. There is an opening tradition on this podcast, and that is to ask you this question. When you were at school, what did you want to be when you grew up? So I'm going to ask Charlie first, if that's okay, and just throw you straight in at a deep end. So what did you want to be when you grew up?
No, that's quite easy actually. I wanted to be a writer.
Okay, perfect.
So that really worked for me because I am now a writer. So I managed to do the whole childhood dream thing. I thought I'd be a journalist, but when I was 16, I went to work for the BBC for a few weeks and realised that I probably wasn't cut out for journalism. It wasn't really the way I wanted to do it. So,
what age did you have that motivation there, that goal of being a writer?
Oh, if you talk to my parents, they'll say it was from when I was tiny. So I knew how to read and write before I went to school. So I think my mother was very keen on me learning. And then she realised I had an aptitude for it. So they were like 4. I think I wrote my first short story when I was 4, something like that. 4 or 5.
Wow,
so
incredible.
Yeah, so it's always been there. So in a way it was, and like I say, my parents are so happy I'm finally now writing. This is what you were meant to do.
That's amazing. That's really lovely as well that it's now what you're doing for a living, Charlie. So that's fantastic. And Sam, what about you?
I think like the cliche boy of that sort of era that I was really into cars, and so I wanted to go work with cars from like a really young age. I was sort of fascinated with Formula One and touring cars and all sorts of stuff like that. And so that kind of led me to getting my first job when I was 16 was actually working for a racing car team, which I got. So it turned out not to be like the path that I wanted to go down sort of forever. But I think that's the same with a lot of people when it comes to, those kind of, child dreams of what you want to do. But I think, cars was kind of like that first love and that first.
I think it's brilliant though that both of you had those aspirations early on in life and then actually went through at least to do that. Charlie, you're now doing that full time, which is fantastic. And Sam, even sometimes you have to live the reality of those childhood dreams, don't you, to realise that maybe it's not all that it's cut out to be. But even getting to that point, working for a racing team is fantastic. So I asked about what you wanted to be when you grew up. Where did you grow up? Because I know you both as being, having a business and running a business in Essex previously. But are you originally from Essex?
I am, yeah. I grew up probably 200 yards from where the shop from where
so right in Leigh-on-Sea.
Yeah, in Leigh-on-Sea. So it was that was my hometown, and We sort of moved around a lot, between that and sort of, I didn't just sort of stay there. I sort of went to university in Nottingham and lived in Birmingham for a while, and then London for a while, and various other stuff. But then we came back to Essex when we opened the business.
Yeah. What about you, Charlie? Where are you from?
Oh, I found it a really hard question to answer because I come from all over the place. My parents moved about a lot, so I think I moved like 6 times before I was 13.
Wow.
So Warwickshire and Hertfordshire and Norfolk, and then finally my parents moved to North Wales. My mum's Welsh, and that's kind of where I say I'm from because they've been there 25 years. Because we've got the Welsh family connection, I'll always say I'm from Wales, and everyone will say, "Well, you haven't got the accent." But it's like, no, because I moved, because I only got there when I was 13. But it's just an easier way of explaining.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay.
So yeah, I was brought up in a almost like a nomadic family, so lots and lots of moving about.
Yeah, well, we'll maybe go on to speak about how that inspired what you're doing now as well. Okay, so how did you both meet then? Because you're husband and wife, I should say. Not that it matters, I guess. Yeah. But how did you meet?
I guess friend of a friend is the easiest way of explaining it. My housemate that I was living with at the moment was going out with Charlie's housemate, and so we just kind of met through that, really.
Yeah, it's not a very interesting story.
Not particularly exciting.
It's all right. I mean, it's a very vanilla story, but that's okay. They don't always have to be.
It was very 2003, I think. It was like just in a bar. Like it was there were no dating apps then or anything like that. So.
I was going to say, I don't think you hear about that anymore, do you? A lot of it's dating apps if you're meeting nowadays. But okay, cool. Right. So I'm gonna take it back now to the question I originally wanted to ask you when I started the call, which is where in the world are you now?
We're in Porto, Portugal, at the moment. We have literally just heard that our residency application has been approved, so we will be residents of Portugal for the foreseeable future now.
Congratulations, that's amazing.
Thank you. As we may go on to talk about later, we've been doing a lot of travel over the last 2 or 3 years, but we're now going to finally have a base. We'd like to continue doing some travel, but we'll now have a base here and have made a lot of friends and connections in Portugal already. And obviously, as you might know through the wine business, we did a lot with Portuguese wines and Portuguese winemakers. So I feel like we've always had like a strong connection there. And we're going to be here for the foreseeable future as our base here in Porto.
That's brilliant. Okay. And with residency, does that basically is open-ended for you guys? There's no time limit on that. You can now be in Portugal for as long as you want to be, ultimately. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. So there's a 5-year route to citizenship here. So if we really enjoy it, we'll continue to stay here and then maybe look at going for citizenship in the future. But we can stay, as long or as little as we like now, I think.
Awesome. Okay. So celebrations today at some point, I'm sure. Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Okay. So before we carry on and this conversation continues, and again, I've got millions of questions I want to ask you both. Can I have just from each of you a very short overview of your careers to the point that you bought your business or started your business in 2013? So Charlie, if I start with you, if you give me a potted history of education up to the point that you founded Vino Vero.
It's not particularly interesting. Career thing, really. So I went to university in Birmingham and I got a degree in English, funnily enough. And then I did what a lot of people do when they finish university and just had to find a job, any job. So I started with recruitment because that's what Sam did. He was a little bit older than me, so I was like, "Oh, okay, this makes sense." And he had connections to be able to help me find a job. £12,000 a year job at the time. Hated it, absolutely hated it. This was 2006, and I think I appreciate there's a lot of now very good recruitment, but then it was like that sort of typical very salesy, like lots of KPIs and quite a lot of it unethical stuff was going on. So I just
don't feel compelled to be nice about recruitment, Charlie. Honestly, it's still going on. It's still going.
And I know it can be good, but anyway, I hated it, so I left. And temping work, and then we went travelling for about 3 months, then moved to London when I fell into charity work, and I worked for Minds mental health charity for about 4 years.
Amazing.
And it's a good charity, a really good charity. But I got stuck on like that sort of lower level. So I was an administrative assistant, and I could never seem to make my way up the ladder. And it was very frustrating because, when you're 25, 26, you want to be improving and going up. And for some reason, I just couldn't do it. So eventually I just said, no, this is just, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to live in London anymore. I don't want to, I want to work for myself. And Sam will say his bit, but he felt the same. So we decided that we were going to open a wine shop. I don't even remember, Sam, you might know why we chose that in the end to very, very start. We liked wine. I think it was as simple as that.
Well, I've been getting into it a little bit more, haven't we? And I started a little blog where I was sort of writing about wines a bit, and we were definitely getting into it a bit more. But like, I think it was just one of those things with like, we wanted to do our own thing. We thought of doing like a brick and mortar business.
We wanted it in Leon. We knew we liked it there. We visited a lot because of Sam's family. We thought we saw a potential there. I went from being administrative assistant one day to being CEO and owner of a wine shop the next, literally, and jumped. It was a really interesting thing. You jump from like nothing to everything straight away. Most people would like go through a bit more of a ladder. I did not, which comes with its own advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, I think you're not bogged down with the way that things should be, and you come in with fresh ideas and original ideas. And I know as a client of Vino Vero, and you guys did some amazing work from my side, and a lot of the people that might be listening to this may be placements of mine that were very happy to drink the wine that I sent via you guys as well. But I think just from the branding, the events that you used to put on as well, it was really just fresh and unique and original as well. So I think that probably did you some favours, Charlie.
I think the biggest thing for me was I've always said this, I just felt like I had absolutely nothing to lose by opening Vino Vero. So what am I leaving? I'm not leaving a career. I'm just leaving a job that I didn't even like very much. I literally, the only thing we had to lose was we put a certain amount of money into the business at the beginning, and it was a very small amount of money to start with because we didn't know whether it was going to work or not. And I was like, I'm prepared to lose that. And then that made the jump so much easier. And every time I was like, I don't know if it's right at the very beginning, my mum was always like, well, would you rather be doing this or would you rather be doing what you were doing?
It's a really good question to ask. It's a really good question to pose for anyone who finds himself in a similar mindset as well. What are you really losing out on by making that decision? Are you going to be happier sticking how you are, or at least taking the risk and jumping into something new? So, Sam, if you can give me a potted history of your side, if that's okay.
Yeah, okay, sure. So we briefly touched on my first job, which was the racing car team. So I did that from when I was 16. I slightly lied and said to them that I could drive a car, which on my first day when I was asked to drive a racing car out of the garage and stalled it a few times and almost crashed into the wall of the garage, it turned out that lie was quite quickly discovered. But they took me under their wing and taught me a lot about how cars work. And I really enjoyed the sort of, getting your hands dirty, literally like working on cars and seeing, when you drive as one and stuff. It was, incredible. So I did that all through university, whenever I had holidays or whenever I could get out and go to race meetings and that kind of thing. After graduating, I kind of flailed for a little bit and didn't really know what to do. By the time I was doing engineering at university, but I think by the time I'd reached the end of the course, I'd realized that I didn't actually want to have a career in that field anymore. I think I sort of spent 3 years learning all the bits that just put me off actually doing anything like that. And it, like a lot of things, the reality of it was a lot less exciting than 16-year-old me had thought that sort of career path might be. It's like, today we're going to be selecting which wheel bearings to use in this thing from this catalog, and it's like, I kind of had more dreams of like designing Formula One cars or something naive like that. But so I think then I just kind of ended up sort of like a lot of people falling into recruitment because it was just one of those jobs that, if you didn't really know what you wanted to do, it was a career path that you could quickly start earning some good money. And it was just sort of quite an easy route to sort of follow. So I did that for, about 4.5 years. And then, as Charlie mentioned, we left to go traveling for a summer. And I'd kind of sort of hoped that that would be an opportunity to sort of change direction a little bit when we came back. But unfortunately, we'd kind of spent like all of our money on our travel trips and sort of didn't really have any sort of any cushion left when we came back. So had to sort of find a job pretty quickly. You know, there's only so long you can sort of crash at your parents before you kind of start to go slightly mad and say like, you know, we need out of here like ASAP. So I went back into recruitment, working in London this time. Again, covering the tech industry. But after a few years, decided I really did need to break out of it. And I spoke to one of my clients who I really liked what they were doing, and talked to them about whether there'd be an opportunity for me to work there, either doing in-house recruitment or doing something else. They were setting up an office in the West Coast of America at that time, and I wondered whether I could go do something over there. And an opportunity came up the role was operations manager, but it was basically a tech startup. So if you weren't writing code or trying to sell the product, it was kind of my job. So I did finance, I did hiring, I did some legal stuff, contracts, any kind of
a few hats.
Stuff. I mean, basically, I was completely
out
of my depth the whole time, basically. But it was an amazing experience to learn so much and have such a varied job. And then that got acquired by Apple in 2013, right around the time that we were opening Vino Vero. It was really nice timing, actually. It kind of dovetailed really perfectly. So I worked 2 jobs for a while we were kind of getting up and running, because they kept me on to help with the transition period. Yeah, it was all a bit nuts, trying to juggle 2 jobs and all that. But I guess a lot of, people when they're starting out businesses, you do have to make those sort of sacrifices a little bit to sort of, make sure that, because I was still earning, so that, there was less pressure on Vino Vero to make money from day one, which I think really helped, because it meant that we could be a little bit more principled about what we were doing, because we could, stick to our guns a little bit.
Yeah, I guess for a lot of people, when they're trying to segue into starting up a new venture, finances and a pot of money being there is one of the biggest stresses that are going to come into your head at any point. And as you say, it's nice to have some more earnings coming in, because then you're not driven to make decisions purely for the finances. You're sticking to other elements that are important to you as well. So when I said squiggly career, I mean that in the most complimentary way possible. I think it's really good to have a squiggly career. There's a lot of people that use that label now and that are much more experienced than me and talk about the benefits of that as well. But so as well as having quite squiggly career paths before Vino Vero, in terms of the different roles and things that you've both done, what inspired you to set up, Charlie, you touched upon this already, but what inspired you to set up beyond wine, I guess? What makes you come from fairly sort of stable career paths? I'd appreciate progression. Maybe Charlie wasn't happening within the charity you're working for as well. But to break away from traditional forms of employment, which is working for someone else, and set up your own thing. What was the catalyst, and how did that even come about? Who instigated the conversation to say, let's do it?
I think it was probably me, I think. Do you think, Sam? I don't know. I have a feeling it would have been me, because I'm always the one that's like, I'm not happy. I realised really quickly into my career that I did not enjoy working in offices, and I didn't see working in them. And I interviewed terribly. Like, I don't think I got a single job after any interview I've ever done. I still interview terribly. So I was like, well, this isn't going to work. My parents had their own business, so I grew up in an entrepreneurial life. Like, my mum was an artist and my dad sold her art, basically. So that's how I was brought up. So I'm working for them as well. So for me, it was really, I think it was always going to be that I was going to do my own thing. And I tried to do my own thing before, like thinking about different ways of doing it. And eventually, once Sam was like, yeah, I'm on board with this too, I think the 2 of us going ahead with it meant that it actually started to actually happen. And there is a picture somewhere, I think we still have it, of a handshake we did at about 2:00 in the morning after a lot of wine. We're like, we are going to do this. We are going to open a shop in Leon C. And that was January, and then I think we opened about 18 months later. We thought it would take a lot longer. Wow. We were still in London. We knew we had to move. We had to find the premises. So we expected it to be maybe 2 or 3 years. But no, once we decided it was
Yeah, that is absolutely incredible. I think, and maybe you've found this as well from speaking to other people that have gone on to more, let's say, that entrepreneurial lifestyle as well. Like my brother and my mum are I say entrepreneurs, but they work for themselves, so they're self-employed. They're creatives as well. So my mum and brother are actually artists. But I think being around people that also work in that way, you can't fail to be inspired by that as well. Sam, what were your parents doing? Did you have that around you? I know through Charlie, by extension.
I think my parents were kind of the opposite of Charlie's family in that sort of regard. Like my dad was from, Leigh-on-Sea, and we grew up in this area. They had very stable jobs working for the civil service. They worked there from like the age of like, I think less than 30 right through to retirement. So like they kind of had that sort of really very long-term stable career. So I think they were kind of much more happy when I was, well, okay, maybe happy is unfair, but like they kind of understood a lot more when I was working in like an office job, so for example, in recruitment or whatever. I think when we first broached the idea of us opening a wine business, they were kind of a little bit skeptical and a little bit unsure, because I think it was kind of quite out of their zone of, what they were familiar with and what careers look like. And, from their point of view, I'd had this, quite steady sort of career almost in sort of recruitment, and then into the startup world and stuff like that. And I think they kind of felt like this is a little bit of a departure from that. So they were a little bit unsure to begin with. So I can't say that I kind of grew up with, an entrepreneurial family or anything like that.
So is this why Charlie is the instigator of these ideas? Sort of putting the hand out and going, Sam, we're doing this.
Oh, no, you were still very keen. Like I just had to do no persuading whatsoever. It's just I'm louder and more forceful than Sam.
Yeah, I think it is really interesting how much like your parents or the people around you do inspire that different mindset though as well. I would assume, Charlie, based on what you've said already, that your parents were like all in and patting you on the back about setting up the business. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they were. My brother's a wedding photographer as well, so they're very used to just us just doing our own thing. And they were fine. I think they found it harder when we transitioned again into traveling, but I think outside of it, they were still great about it actually. But like, I think when you move from bricks and mortar that's very successful into something that looks completely unknown, I think it's always a bit harder. But my parents have been supportive the whole way through. I've been very fortunate with that.
Well, we could speak about Vino Vero for a large portion of this conversation, and I think as a chapter of your lives, you must be incredibly proud, because you ran that business for 7 years. As you say, it was successful. It was as shop fronts go, so recognisable, and it was like held a long-standing position in Lee Road, which, if you can do that, it's a thing in itself, isn't it? There's quite a high turnover in Lee Road, even higher now. But to have had that shop and business, it was more than a shop. I appreciate that, for such a long time. What a success. So I think that's a great chapter of your lives. What the hell inspires you then to start that next chapter, which, as you say, was this transition to sell it all, and not just the business, everything else, to then embark upon the lifestyle that you live now? So this is going to be a different one, because I'm sure you're both going to have very clear stories about this as well. So maybe, Sam, if I start with you, just what happened? What was the genesis of this idea to sell the business when it's successful? It's 2020, so I think for a lot of people that was the year that, if you weren't already thinking about what the hell am I doing, 2020 probably sparked a few more ideas about that. So tell me what happened.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case. I think the first time I really remember thinking about selling the business was a couple of years earlier than that, around 2018. That was the year that I went to work Harvest in Beaujolais for the first time, and Charlie did as well. And I think we had different ideas about like what life after Vino Vero would look like, but I think I definitely at that stage remember, I can't remember, we might have even been talking to like an agent or something about selling the business already at that point, I think. But I think we just kind of felt like the business would continue going and continue growing, but it wasn't necessarily exciting us anymore. I think we also, had itchy feet, because we've always enjoyed travel, and you kind of feel like, oh, you've got this business in wine, you can travel as much as you want, and you can to an extent, but you're always going to have that tie. You're always going to have, it's just one of those things, isn't it? You go away for one day, and that's the day when deliveries don't turn up on time, and something cancels, something gets lost in the shipping or whatever like that. And so you can never really focus on the actual travel. You're always being dragged back to the business because, as you alluded to, it wasn't just a shop. It was also, we did importing, we did distribution, we did online, we did corporate gifts, we did loads of other things. So there was a lot of balls in the air, and I think it was just one of those things where whenever you try and get away, there's always something that's sort of snagging you. And so I think, the combination of sort of itchy feet, I think we were feeling like we'd kind of done what we wanted to do with it. I think at that time I was kind of envisaging that I'd personally like to get more involved in actually making wine. I did harvest. We both did winemaking courses and that kind of thing. And subsequently it didn't pan out that way, but I don't regret that. But yeah, I felt like it was just a growing need to sort of move beyond and try and get a bit more travel involved, and it wasn't going to work with that.
When people say itchy feet and they want to change, that could mean like selling up the business, and understand that, but it doesn't necessarily mean selling everything. So was there a time where it was just about selling the business, or was it all in? When you knew you were going to sell the business, did you also know that you were going to literally sell everything? So did you own a house at the time?
Yeah, we did.
Or were you renting? Yeah, so you owned a house. Yeah. So I'm assuming a car, or whatever it was. So you chose. So from itchy feet and realizing that maybe the engagement, the satisfaction, the passion, which is a bit of a cliche word, running the business had started to dissipate. You've gone, right, we're going to sell everything. Is there a part of that where it was just the business or just the house, or try and mix things up a bit? You just dived straight in and went, we're going for it.
I think from what I remember, it's going back now. we did toy with just selling the business, keeping the house, renting it out, this sort of thing. And we realised that we just wanted that clean break, and we were never going to get it if we had ties in the UK. So when Brexit happened, the day that Brexit happened in 2016 was the day that both of us said we've always wanted to live abroad. We've never felt truly comfortable in the UK. And we said that was the day that we said we are doing this. At some point we are going to leave the UK and we are not going to come back. That sort of took a long time to happen, but when we realised that we were going to sell the business and that we had the right person to buy it, Jaime was absolutely the right person to buy it, we just decided that was the time to go all in and do what we promised that we were going to do for the last 4 years. Because something I really am keen on is if I said to everybody, oh, we're going to move abroad, and like I don't like to be that person that keeps talking about this stuff and never actually does it. So we decided the best thing to do would just be to sell everything, and completely change the way that we do our finances as well, because we no longer have investments. We don't have like assets, like physical assets, and we wanted that freedom. Actually, really.
I think that has to be the draw. Was Digital Nomad a label that you were familiar with before you made that decision? Is it something you were aware of?
Yes and no. I mean, we never saw ourselves like that at all. Even when we left, we didn't. We spent 6 months in Spain, and we lived in Rioja, which is like the least digital nomad type place you could ever imagine. We were there because we love it and we love the wine there and that sort of thing. And we only really started to understand about the label when we moved to Croatia. And I got, this is 21, and I got, I won a competition to become a digital nomad for a month with 10 other people in Dubrovnik. As a guest of Dubrovnik's city town hall.
I remember seeing this at the time on LinkedIn, Charlie, as well, yeah.
Yeah. So that was when we really started to understand what digital nomad meant, and that we were digital nomads, even though we've never really seen ourselves like that. But I guess we were.
The impetus to set up wasn't to become digital nomads. I guess it's just a label that is best describes people that are working with the sort of lifestyle and freedom and flexibility that you guys have.
Yeah, I mean, we had no idea what we were going to do when we left Vino Vero, if we're honest. Like our brain capacity had completely been depleted by First of all, at the beginning of 2020, I took 2 months off work because I basically had a breakdown, which was not so much fun, but it was just too much work. It was just too much. And then COVID hit, and then we sold the business. So we had no idea what we were going to do. And then there was an issue of Brexit as well, because as Sam said, we were looking to make wine. Once Brexit hit, we were not legally allowed to work in Europe anymore, like for a company, so for a winery or anything like that. The only thing you could do was become a digital nomad if you wanted to continue to live in Europe. So that meant that it was a bit of a convoluted route, and it definitely wasn't we are going to become digital nomads the minute that we finished the shop. There was so much uncertainty. We had no idea where we were going to be able to live, whether we were even be allowed outside at that point, because this was October 2020, and whether Brexit was really going to happen or not. I think even towards the very end of it, we wondered if it might or not, or whether it might fall through, and we could still work for wineries. But once that happened, then we became fully fledged digital nomads.
Digital nomads, yeah. So, Sam, you mentioned you are someone that sort of just that dives into something, sees an opportunity and embraces it and goes full into that as well. That sounds like a perfect example of that happening.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think when I was sort of thinking about my career, like in terms of preparing for this talk today, I was thinking that at every stage, I and we together have just kind of jumped into things. So, when I was 16, I wrote, because that's what you did when you were 16, you can email or anything like that. I literally wrote a letter to this racing team and said, "Can I come work for you?" And they were like, "Sure." And so that's how I got that one. And then, we started our own business. We just kind of jumped into it. And then the same with, the app development, which I'm doing now. I just kind of, jumped into that, and I'm just sort of doing that. So I think there's definitely a common thread of, like, I think just jumping in, because I think I think a lot of the time it's easy to worry about what could go wrong. Sometimes, you feel like your confidence might be knocked. Sometimes there are financial issues, but I think, doing whatever you can to mitigate those issues. So, for example, when we started Vino Vero, we, as Charlie mentioned, we put aside a certain amount of money that we felt, if we just burn through that and the business fails, so be it. We're prepared to risk that amount of money. It wasn't vast sums. It wasn't going to, cripple us for life. But, we just had that sort of pot that we mentally put aside. And I think it's important to not sort of, not be reckless with things, but I think it's important to jump in, because I think, as you alluded to earlier, you learn so much when you just kind of go in and do it. And, you learn a whole bunch of stuff that you would never be exposed to if you sort of slowly progress your way up, or you might have different, ideas about the way things should be done. Sure, there's definitely, you do need to, learn some things the right way, but I think you can also just skip straight to go and jump in with some of these things. And I think you can be surprised at, what the outcome can be.
Yeah, I think immersing yourself in something is the best way to learn, isn't it, half the time? And maybe we'll talk about this maybe later as well. It's the same if you're trying to learn a language. I hear this from so many people that have learned a language. I'm not one of those people. But, immersing yourself in the country or with a load of people that only speak that language is sometimes the best way to do it. So, not waiting until you know everything to just get out and learn, I think it's a way that my brain is wired. It's not the way everyone's brain is wired, but I'm completely with you on that. You've given 3 examples there, Sam, I think, of writing to the racing team, and that worked out, sort of diving into that. Vino Vero, diving into that. Doing the coding, diving into that, and they've all worked out really well. Has there ever been a time where you've dived into something and thought, shit, this has backfired completely? If the answer's no, then great. But yeah, I thought I'd ask.
I don't necessarily think specifically, but I think after leaving Vino Vero, there was definitely a stage where I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and, just kind of, sort of tried a few different things. I mean, I was writing on Medium, and that was going quite well, but I just kind of lost I didn't have unlike Charlie, who's got this burning desire to write, and, she gets up in the morning and, just instantly just wants to write and get those ideas down. I always found that more of a torturous process. Like, it took me a long time to kind of get the thoughts out onto the page, and I was constantly writing and then editing and then starting again. And stuff. So I'd definitely say the blogging on Medium and stuff like that was harder for me. Definitely, I don't feel like it necessarily came supernatural. So yeah, I would say I wouldn't necessarily count it as a failure at all, but I would say that, you know, it was something that I definitely it turned out not to be the right path, and I found it a lot more difficult than I thought maybe I would.
Understood. Okay. I'm going to go back one step here, and just because I think this is something people will be really interested in if they are inspired to kind of follow the same route as you guys have done as well. The practicalities, Charlie, of selling everything, business aside, because I appreciate that's going to be very nuanced and specific to what you were trying to sell. But, you know, from going to the point where you just want to sell, I'm imagining a massive boot sale.
Yeah, you're not far off.
What did you do? What was the process? Obviously, take me through that.
We found, for want of a better word, I know there's a lot of stigma around this word, but we found minimalism about the time we opened the shop. As I always tell the story about the fact that once Sam finished his job and we were fully reliant on Vino Vero, we were living on £300 a month. And that was after we paid for our rent and bills. Everything else had to come out £300 a month. And I read this thing that was like,
incredible.
Oh, the best way to give yourself a pay rise is to spend less. And I was like, well, I definitely need to do that right now. So we kind of delved into it, and that meant that, and we got quite into it, and we never had a lot of stuff. So basically, once we decided that minimalism was the way we wanted to go, we never had a lot of things to get rid of. So by the time we sold the house, we did have stuff, of course. We had a fair bit of stuff, but like we didn't have. It wasn't the. I think the average. Well, the average in America is 300,000 items in every household. And there is absolutely no way that we had anything like that.
That to me screams of like kleptomania.
Yeah.
It's that doesn't sound right, but yeah, I can imagine.
I think the average in Europe is about 10,000. So America's a completely different beast. But so really we looked around the house and we said, well, what have we got here? And we thought, well, we've got some IKEA furniture that we bought years ago. We've got that was basically falling apart anyway. We've got a few keepsakes, but not much. And once you kind of realise that a lot of the stuff you have in your house is not, it just wasn't anything. It was just stuff. It was just furniture. It was just
There was no sentimentality behind it. No sort of deeper connection with IKEA furniture.
No, not really. I mean, we kept some stuff, but we've kept very little. I mean, we now have in my parents' home at home, in their loft, I think we have, I don't know, maybe like 3 boxes worth of stuff, something like that. And the biggest thing that we miss is our kitchen stuff. So I've still got like my Le Creuset pots that we got for our wedding present, things like that. But everything else, and our nice wine glasses. But that was,
of course.
But even the wine, we have 300 bottles of wine, and we said, well, what do we do with this? We don't plan to come back to the UK, so we're like, well, we'll drink it. So we did. We drank the whole collection, and I think we've got like 3 or 4 bottles left at home. And I'm pleased we did that, because I think if we'd kept it, it would have a lot of it would have been ruined by now anyway. So
well, it's better to enjoy it, isn't it?
Yeah. Once you know the sort of transient nature of life, and the fact that like when we first met, we had nothing. We met as 2 separate adults at 19 and 21. We didn't own anything, and okay, we accumulated some stuff throughout our time, and then we've gone back to zero again. And it really, and once that mentality really helped, I think that sort of minimalistic mentality that we've been living for years with very little stuff, which was great, because then we had more money to spend on, we had hardly any mortgage, well, not too much anyway, and hardly any stuff. We could spend our money on what we really, truly loved, which was travel, wine, food, and this sort of thing. And that's why we did it in the first place. So it wasn't that difficult. And I get asked a lot, like, what do you regret giving up? And it's really hard to think of anything really that I don't need an IKEA sofa in my life, and then and then once you start renting Airbnbs, you realise how much stuff in life you can rent you don't necessarily need to own. So we rent our stuff now. We rent our bed and our sofa and all of our crockery and that sort of thing. We carry a chef's knife around with us, because that is something that we definitely do love, because of cooking and that sort of thing we do love. But that's kind of...
I was going to say, thank you for clarifying it was for cooking. I was just wondering if this is going to go very dark all of a sudden, but yeah. But no, I think, so really that process of even the mindset shift to sell things had already happened because of this commitment that you'd made to minimalism as well. And I know you write a lot about minimalism and that minimalistic lifestyle as well, Charlie. And on the back of this, I'll post some links to your writing. And I'm not too familiar with the platforms you guys use. I subscribe to Substack and some elements of it, but I'll definitely share that because I think people would find that really inspiring as well. So it wasn't like sort of this hot to cold, we've got all this stuff, we need to sell it, or you'd already kind of got into that mindset that minimalism is the way it was working for you?
Yeah, we decluttered pretty much everything that was superfluous, really. It wasn't too hard. I mean, it was practically annoying because you had to sell a lot of stuff. And interestingly, at that point, we couldn't tell anybody that we were selling that shop because it was all under NDAs and all that sort of thing. And people would come around the house that were our customers because they found our stuff on Facebook Marketplace and were like, you're selling all your stuff. We're like, we're just moving in with our parents. And even the time that the woman came around to evaluate the house, when we put the house on the market, she was like, you're selling it. We're like,
that's so Leon C. That is so Leon C.
She was like, why are you selling your house? And we're like, COVID, we have to move in with our parents.
Oh no!
That's very Leon C. I'm a Western, but still.
Yeah, same. Yeah, wow. So Sam, with all this happening, I'm gonna ask a question that might sort of I don't know. It is a relationship question. Have you always been sort of on the same wavelength with most of these decisions? The minimalism piece, it sounds like the travel has always been a huge thing for you, and each chapter of your life you seem to have been on the same page. But when it comes to selling all your stuff and minimalism as well, so let's go back to the minimalistic lifestyle, minimalism. God, it's very hard to say that quickly. Really hard. Are you both sort of simpatico when it comes to that?
Yeah, I think one of the strongest things that we've had, and one of the reasons why we've been together so long, is I think we're very much on the same page. And even if we're not always 100%, because you're never going to exactly have the same thoughts on everything, I think we're very good at, I guess the word you'd use is compromise, but not in the way that one person doesn't get what the other one wants, but more if one of us says, I want to do this, then the other one thinks, well, okay, how are we going to make that happen? We're not going to sort of put up barriers, say, I want to stay the way it is, or whatever. So I think we've always been good at that. I think I've never really been particularly material person anyway. I never had, before we got into the actual idea of minimalism, it's not like we had tons and tons of stuff anyway. So I think that was, I think throughout our relationship, there's a lot of times where, for example, I've gone to Charlie with an idea, or she's come to me with an idea, and I think we both listen to that. So she said, I've heard about this thing, let's give it a go. And, I was instantly like, yeah, great. It wasn't like, you need to convince me, or I'm going to be really, stuck in my ways about this sort of thing. I think we kind of instantly were on the same page with that. And I think through the whole time selling Vino Vero and, beyond, I think we've kind of been on the same page. And I think we've kind of been very good at listening to what each other want and, accepting that and finding ways to make it work rather than, sticking our oar in and saying, I don't want that. I want to do it this way.
And it is, without blowing smoke up your arse, guys, it is an amazing achievement to have gone through those, seismic shifts in your life as well. And to have backed each other and supported each other in the way that you have as well. And it obviously helps that you've got a very similar mindset, but to go through, starting a business, selling your house, moving into the lifestyle that you've decided upon as well, I think is it's commendable and inspiring again for a lot of people, I think.
I think it was a funny one because I think a lot of the time people say, what's it like working together? That must be really difficult. We got asked that every day when we started a business, and it was the absolute easiest thing. I found working with Charlie just so easy. We could just say exactly what we needed to say. There was no politics around, this person's my boss or my colleague in this way or whatever, because we were a couple, you can talk openly and honestly and say, we need to do this or we need to do that, or what do you think about that? What do you think about this? And I think we just worked together really well. And I think it was a really easy partnership. And actually the hardest thing for me in a lot of ways has been after Vino Vero, like forging our own careers and not working together has been much weirder than working together, because we did it for 7 or 8 years. Like, it was a long time, and I think there was a big adjustment for me in not having this partner like doing working towards the same goals as I was. Like, finding my own path again was quite difficult. So yeah, it's definitely been a journey on that front.
Do you think the same kind of feeling might have applied regardless of whether you were a couple or just working with someone towards a common goal, Sam? So it could have been a business partner, say, as well. Do you feel like the sort of digital nomad lifestyle and the way of working you've got at the moment, being quite insular and working alone, do you think that would have probably applied if it was a business partner as well? No offense, Charlie, but you can see the strength of the relationship that you've got. But do you find working on your own and that transition difficult regardless, do you think, Sam?
I don't know. It's a difficult one to isolate, really, I suppose. I think because we're a couple as well as like business partners, I think it was a deeper, a stronger connection and a stronger goal. I think we were kind of more entwined in the business than it would be if it was just a couple of business partners working on the same thing. But yeah, having not been in that situation so much, it's a bit hard to say. But I think it would have still been a difficult change, but I think maybe just slightly different. Different idea. Okay.
So when you decided that you sold all your stuff and you decided to move out of the UK, did you have a country in mind that you actually wanted to land in at that stage?
It was Spain to start with.
It was Spain, right, okay.
Yeah, Spain, I think, has always been sort of one of our favourite places. So, but we, as I said before, we had Brexit in the mix as well. So we knew that it was a lot harder than just saying, we're just going to move to Spain. At that point, that they said, if you're going to move to Spain and become resident in Spain, if you do that before the end of the year, you can stay. So we said, great, we'll do that. Right. So we tried to get residency in Spain, but it turned out once you delve a little bit more into Spanish tax laws and citizenship, for instance, they make you give up your British citizenship if you become a citizen, this sort of thing. We realised unfortunately, it wasn't going to be the place that we could stay. They're also quite heavily taxed on freelancers. So Spain has a thing where the minimum you can you have to. They have an autonomo. It's like a social security, like national insurance, and it's at least €350 per person per month, whether you work or not. And we decided that was just going to cripple us a little bit whilst we were establishing our businesses. So it wasn't Spain in the end. But that was fine because we always just wanted to travel. The only reason we were thinking about stopping was because of Brexit, because we needed that European residency. So it kind of forced us, actually, once that happened and once we had to leave Spain, it forced us to travel because we could have just stayed one place, but we wanted to travel. It was a bit of a strange thing, but we started to travel more, and I think I'm really pleased in a way that it forced us to do that. Otherwise, and it forced us into places. Brexit forced us into places that we might not have gone before. Yeah. Because we might have just wanted to hang out we originally wanted to hang out in France, Spain, Portugal, Italy. These are all the wine countries. These are all the countries that we love the most. But we can't do that.
Oh, I was just going to say, as a result, we had some incredible experiences that we would have never had if it hadn't been for that. So, for example, the Croatia trip that we took, and then Charlie getting the digital nomad thing. We met so many people. I've met a business partner through that. In fact, 2 business partners that I'm starting up other businesses with. There's just so many amazing connections and people that we met as a result of that one sort of on a whim trip to go there. And our whole life could have been really different if we'd just, not been forced into making that step. And if we'd just ended up staying in Spain, for example, it could have been quite different. I mean, even though we were planning to use Spain as a base rather than, just never leave there. But still, I think we, being forced out of that comfort zone a little bit, gave us some amazing experiences.
Definitely. It kind of really kicked off that digital nomad pathway for you, didn't it, as well? Okay, that's really, it's just really interesting as well how versatile you both seem. Like there's a hurdle and you're like, okay, we'll just flow around that. Do you think that's like an innate character traits that you've got, which is quite, just this ability to kind of go with the flow? That's the best way I can describe it. But do you feel like you've both got that about you?
I think so. I think we both enjoy learning a lot. Like I think we're both quite curious people.
Well, I was going to say, I think we're quite big picture people. So I'll often look at things from a really high, like up in the sky kind of thing, and try and think, well, this is the end goal. However you do that, it doesn't really matter. There are like a million ways you can end up doing that, or the end goal might change. But it's like all about looking at like the bigger picture. I think really really helps, because I think sometimes if you get a bit bogged down with detail, you'll never do anything. Whereas I'm very much more like, well, give it a go. I mean, let's just try it, like kind of thing. So yeah, detail is not my forte at all, and I think sometimes that can be a good thing. I found it a good thing in Vino Vero as well. It meant that you wouldn't get bogged down in little things that maybe didn't really matter. Trying to keep what really matters in mind, I think really helps.
Again, that might resonate with a few people as well. Like the journey that you take, not getting bogged down in that detail and looking at the bigger picture, as you say, the journey you take to get there could be squiggly as anything. Again, that kind of resonates with it goes back to the squiggly career piece as well. But it's getting from A to B, and that can look like anything, can't it? That route that you take as well. Did you already have an idea of how you were going to make money once you'd sold up and moved on?
I think we had a few different ideas about what we wanted to do, but I think I kind of wanted to keep it quite open. I mean, I think at that stage, I think Charlie was quite keen to take a bit of a break away from working in wine. I think I was still keen to get involved, do some work in wineries and things like that. But after December 2020, after the Brexit deal was signed, that became impossible. So that kind of put that idea to rest. I think we talked about like doing like some consulting for other like entrepreneurs wanting to start up businesses, either in wine or in other sort of things like that.
You did a little bit of work with wineries to help get their wine into different markets as well.
Yeah, I didn't do a great job on that.
But
you tried, Sam. You tried.
No, I think I definitely wanted a break. I needed that. I didn't really touch wine for about 18 months, other than just have like a glass in the evening. I didn't want to learn or do anything about that. It was just as I say, I had like a bit of a breakdown in 2020, and that was part of that. So Sam was a bit more keen to carry on with wine. It came back actually, so that was really good. It came back about 18 months ago. So I'm now fully back into it. I'm fully back into writing about it, and that's it. That's
great. So how then did you get on that path of? How important was it to you to come up with like a steady way of making money? Because I'm assuming in selling up you had some money there as a bit of security, which meant maybe jumping straight in and trying to earn money wasn't at the forefront of your mind. But how did it come about? What was the evolution from now getting a steady income? Have you got a steady income?
No. Not steady. Like, money comes in, but it's not steady. But that's fine.
Okay.
You can take this one.
Oh, I can take this one, seeing so that I'm one that has like very, very little steady income whatsoever.
Well, I think it's just it's an interesting aspect of, again, the lifestyle that you're leading, because some people might think, right, well, I need to, because there are companies that offer remote, work from anywhere policies. You don't have to be a freelancer to live the life that you're living, I guess. But as a freelancer, and I guess having that minimalistic lifestyle as well that you've got, maybe that just doesn't have to be so much of an impetus and a driver for
That's
you.
Definitely the most
and it sounds as well like
to not have big outgoings. The most important thing. As soon as you do that, everything gets so much easier.
Yeah, because I can imagine you can lead to. Sorry, Sam. The only point I was going to say that I can imagine what you could do by selling everything and then just getting into this mindset where you need to make money is that you're just taking all the stress that you might have felt living in the UK and having all the things that you had, putting yourself in an environment that's a bit more alien to you, where actually that stress is probably going to be compounded even more by the fact you need to make money.
Yeah, you definitely see that with some digital nomads. They want that because it is stressful living in other countries. There's always issues, and then if you add the fact that you have to work 5 days a week, 9 to 5. On top of that, that can get very difficult for people. And a lot of people end up having to decide, am I going to travel or am I going to work? And lots and lots of digital nomads stop the nomad bit because it's hard to try and do both. Yeah. But I think for us, we always we never wanted to have to work all hours of all days we did that at Vino Vero, and it was exhausting, and we didn't want to we wanted to make a life where we didn't necessarily have to do that. And a big part of that, as I say, was to make sure our outgoings were not too big. And then there was a lot of like structuring finances. We're both quite focused when it comes to finances. Neither of us have ever like debt. We don't, we're very careful, not necessarily frugal, but careful, and we make sure that we only spend in areas that we care about, which is largely travel, food, wine, friends. That's kind of it. So anything else we don't spend on at all. And I think it's stuff like that that really helps be able to work out. If you get your finances in order, then your work becomes less stressful. That means if you don't have a steady income, you're not too scared. And you can do that in lots of different ways. Some people have savings pots, some people have passive income or investments. It depends on the situation as to how you do that. But for us, it was always like, this is the end goal, to not have to work all hours of the day. How do we make that happen? What are the different ways that we can do that? That's again another big picture sort of idea.
Yeah, brilliant. Go on, Sam. Did you want to interject anything there?
No, I think that's kind of a pretty good summation of where we're at. I think, by keeping our outgoings as low as possible, and by really being really intentional with how we spend any money, it means that we've had, incredible experiences. We've met great people. We've been to great places, but it's also given us a bit of breathing space to learn and develop and to see what works and what doesn't. And, for example, with the coding, I started around Christmas 21. I took my first sort of coding courses, and then I've been kind of building up Kava, which is my coffee app, which I launched towards the end of last year. And then I've been working on another couple of projects, but neither of these are kind of really sort of bringing in any money yet. But it's given, by having our finances in place where, we are in a situation where we have low costs of living, we have, Charlie is now earning, enough money that with that and some, we can lean on our investments when we need to and things like that to sort of, supplement our income. It means that I've got the opportunity to sort of focus on developing those projects rather than, having to just go out and get a 9-to-5 job, for example. I think after having run our own thing for so long, I think the idea of going back to sort of, starting an entry-level developer position, working, steady hours the whole time, I think I'd find quite difficult these days. So I think it's worked out, perfectly for both of us in terms of like our personality types, how we like working. We fall into this kind of, nice sort of routine and rhythm that I think fits us very well.
Yeah, brilliant. I think you mentioned there being intentional with your finances or being intentional just with your plans in general. You can kind of reverse engineer everything else, can't you? Charlie, you referenced those 4 things that you want to spend your money on. If they're your 4 pillars, just reverse engineer everything from there and understand how much money you need to focus on those priorities. And a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people just get sucked into whatever, their earnings kind of dictate their lifestyle, and it doesn't need to be like that. I'm guilty of it as well. I'm saying it, I'm not preaching to anyone. You guys are doing it far, far better than I am. But yeah, I think if you can just be intentional about what you're spending it on, and it just takes a hell of a lot of pressure off, doesn't it?
I wrote a piece that went viral about this. I called it like the 5 pillars rule, and it was basically the idea that you think of the 5 most important things in your life, and that's where you spend your money. So I think it was, what was it? Writing, travel, family and friends, coffee, food and wine. I think that was, you can really put it at 3 for us, but and that's how we spend our money. Yeah, and I think that resonated with a lot of people because a lot of people need that focus, to think, where am I really truly happy spending money, and where Am I not? And as soon as you do that, suddenly you have got endless money to spend on this stuff, but you have more than you think because you're not siphoning it off into something that you don't really care about. Like, for instance, I don't know, shoes. I don't know. For me, shoes. But for somebody else, something else. But for somebody else, shoes might be one of their pillars, and that's cool. But then you have to, nobody has an infinite amount of money. You've got to decide where you want to spend it.
So with technology then, and how it supports the way that you guys are working, the infrastructure in the countries that you do work in, I guess, has to be a consideration for you, doesn't it? I mean, it doesn't sound like you'd be necessarily traveling to many countries where they're not going to have readily available internet, but how much does technology steer you into where you have been traveling over the last few years?
I don't know if we've really considered it too much, actually. But you said.
Okay.
Yeah, I although I'm working in tech now and Charlie writes online, I think our requirements in terms of technology are pretty simple, really. I mean, you just need fairly reliable Wi-Fi connection and somewhere to work from, be it apartment or be it coffee shop or occasional co-working, this kind of thing. So I think everywhere that we've been to, we've mainly traveled around Europe. So we've spent time in Spain, Portugal, Croatia, we went to Georgia, Turkey, Romania, Albania, various other countries, but all around Europe. And so we've never really had a problem anywhere with, not having good enough Wi-Fi or anything like that. It's always been fine. So I'd say that from a technology point of view, everything is so ubiquitous now in terms of what we need. I mean, this lifestyle wouldn't have been possible, even probably 5 years ago, it would have been difficult. And certainly 10 years ago, it would have been very, very difficult. But now, suddenly, everything is so easily accessible. The technology is there pretty much everywhere to make this kind of lifestyle possible. If you were on loads and loads of, video calls all day, then maybe your bandwidth requirements would be more difficult. But with both of us working for ourselves, it's kind of, that's not really so much of a priority for us. So it really means that, we can travel pretty much anywhere without having to worry about it.
And I guess because of the countries you've been traveling around, time difference as well hasn't been an issue for you. I mean, I guess the catalyst behind me asking that question, I'm hoping that maybe businesses listening to this might be inspired to think, do you know what, there is, I know we're talking to two freelancers now, but more businesses might be inspired to think, okay, well, how can I support people that are working for me if they wanted to choose to live this lifestyle for a set period of time or open-ended? So what can you put in place? So I guess, the reason I asked that question is just to see what the infrastructure is like for people that want to work like this in the countries that you've experienced. But from what you're saying, Wi-Fi connectivity is what you need, isn't it? And again, for bigger corporates that might require their teams to be on Teams or Zoom calls, you'd expect some sort of stable connection. But I'm just trying to take
There's so many co-workings that you go to everywhere. So, because, I have occasional calls with like my business partner and stuff like that for one of my projects, but, that's fine to just do, from a coffee shop or whatever. But if you need to be on more professional calls, there's loads of co-working spaces that have, quiet booths where you can go and make a long-term call on good internet. You're not going to get disturbed or anything like that. So we see people all the time that work for big corporates and do this lifestyle without any problems whatsoever. And I think as you alluded to, like time zone can be an issue for some people. And if you're on the other side of the world, that could make things very difficult. But I think, if it's, as long as it's not West Coast USA to, Georgia, right, like the country of Georgia, not the state of Georgia. That kind of massive time difference could make things very difficult. But anywhere within Europe where you've only got, here in Portugal, we're on the same time as the UK, so there's never any issue from that point of view. So I think there are very few barriers, and I think we find that we work very efficiently and effectively, and I think we can be very focused about getting work done. So I think any companies that worry that if their staff are off, digital nomading around Europe, they're not going to get any work done. I would see the exact opposite. Like in all the people that we see that do this lifestyle, they're very driven, determined, focused people. And I would warrant that they get a lot more work done focusing working independently rather than being in office and getting distracted all the time. And I mean, John, you work from home, and you must see that. Obviously, I know you've got family and stuff like that, which maybe sometimes sort of gets in the way, but you can juggle it around it. You can fit your outside work commitments around your work. And I find that I can't speak for you, but I find that both of us are incredibly focus when we work and get stuff done. And I don't think companies need to worry about the fact that, if someone's off digital nomading, they're not going to work.
And even the time differences, I know people who say it's a massive hack, because if you're working ahead of your company, you can get a lot done before that company even opens, and you've got all that focus time. And for me, I mean, for as a writer, I write for publications that are in America, so I can get my work over to them overnight, and it's there on their doorstep, when they get in at 9 a.m. So there's sometimes you can look at it a completely different way. Things like an issue around the time stuff, and it actually can be a really good thing.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I'm banging the drum for as much flexibility to be offered by employers as humanly possible. So it's great to hear that you're also, as well as still being able to be productive yourselves as freelancers, but you're also, bumping into people, meeting people that work for big corporates that are equally as productive and are still doing really good jobs for their people. Because for me, a lot of it boils down to trust. This archaic thing about micromanagement and being able to see people or having a bit more control over where people are. I mean, as long as people are getting work done, if they're getting from A to B and getting the work completed when it needs to be completed, why does it matter? We've got all the infrastructure and technology now to say, let's open up everything universally, and just, why can't that happen? So I think if we can break the barriers to that, especially, I won't bog you down with too much recruitery speak at the moment, but like with talent shortages and skill shortages as well, why not open the talent pools and break down these sort of geographical barriers, which started to happen during the pandemic a lot more, but there's this narrative now creeping back in that people need to be back in the office or back in country. All the remote working policies are shifting quite a lot to make sure people are limited to how much they can be out of country now, which I think is a real shame.
Yeah,
I agree, and I think you're shrinking your talent pool when you do that completely. Charlie, you were going to say something?
No, I was going to say you're right. I mean, it's a real shame, and you think the pandemic. I mean, all the stats in the pandemic said that this works. That remote working works, home working works, and I don't know why companies have decided to go back. I think it's just a return to the status quo is not always a good thing. We all thought it was going to be a new normal, and then it's not. So and it's a shame.
Exactly. No one uses the phrase new normal anymore, do they? Yeah, because I mean, it's like, well, no, because it's now gone back to the way it was. So new normal was being bandied around so much, wasn't it, at that time? This is the next kind of wave, the evolution of the way of working. And yeah, it's a shame that a lot of companies as well. I mean, I'm sure you've seen that Zoom have requested that a lot more of their employees go back to the office, which is the biggest irony out there.
Quite ironic.
Absolutely crazy. All right, this is going to be a hard question to answer for you guys, but I really appreciate the insight you've given to your kind of journey and experiences of becoming digital nomads. I'm going to label you as that.
That's
sorry,
fine.
for marketing purposes, it helps as well. But for becoming digital nomads, what would your primary piece of advice be if you could only give one piece of advice to anyone that's sitting on the fence and wants to become a digital nomad? Charlie, I'll start with you. What's your one piece of advice? Sorry, that you would give someone that's maybe on the fence and thinking about adopting this lifestyle or embracing this lifestyle?
I would say to start, if you're nervous about it, start smaller than you think. You do not have to go to the craziest country you can possibly think of in order to become a digital nomad. You do not have to go to Thailand if it's miles away. You can go to, I don't know, France, for instance, or you can go somewhere that you've been before on holiday, for instance, because I think sometimes people just start too much too soon, and it gets nerve-wracking, and there's too many things, there's too many variables, like time zones, like trying to deal with completely different cultures to your own whilst also trying to work. So just don't do that. Just start smaller and work your way up. And I've had, this is advice that I've heard from lots of seasoned nomads. Just start in Europe if Europe is a safe place for you. Then go to, say, somewhere a little bit more, a little bit different, like, say, Turkey. And then go to somewhere else like, I don't know, China. Like, just work your way up. Yeah, that would be mine.
Okay, fantastic. Sam, what about you?
I think to, first of all, like, understand why you want that lifestyle and what it is you want out of it. Do you want to go discover new cultures? Do you just want to change? Do you want to meet new people? Do you just, what factors are driving that? And then use that to influence where you go and how you work. I think, people see these cliche pictures of digital nomads, like, with their laptop on some tropical beach and think, oh, that would be nice. And it's like, okay, but would that lifestyle actually work for you? Would you enjoy living in that culture? Would you enjoy, everything about that? So really think about how you enjoy traveling and working and finding places where you're going to fit with that. So because there's lots of people that actually do enjoy essentially an office environment. It's just they don't want that office environment to always be the same place or to be, surrounded by their colleagues. Some people enjoy working in a co-working in another country where, they just get to sort of, have the office vibe, but in a different place. So I think really thinking about how you enjoy traveling, why you want that lifestyle, what things would make it as easy and as comfortable for you as possible, and using that to really inform what you do. And don't just book a ticket out to Thailand and, say you're off, but really think about where you would want to go and how you would want to do it. And just forget about whatever anyone else thinks about what a digital nomad should look like. And, we meet all sorts of people on the road, from families to 21-year-olds, to people in their 60s, to every sort of person can find a way to make this lifestyle work if they want it to, and if they have a good motivation behind it. So yeah, don't be put off by any cliche ideas about what it should look like. Work out what you want and what you would like to get out of it, and stuff.
I guess it goes back to your point about all the words you used earlier, which is intentional, isn't it? It's being intentional about it, and if you in moments where maybe the reasons for why you're doing something start to forget, or maybe aren't as focused on them, it's just always bringing yourself back to the why of the decision you've made and exactly what you've done it for. Because I can imagine as well, some people might start this path as digital nomads, and maybe in working the way they work, they find that they're slipping into what is more that sort of traditional form of employment. So, okay, well, I want to work as a freelancer, but now I've got an opportunity and I'm finding so much freelance work that I'm working 5 days a week. Okay, well, there's some good money coming in now as well, but then you're bogged down by exactly the same restraints that you were before in traditional employment. So if you start to say to yourself, why am I doing this? Was it because I wanted more flexibility, freedom, the ability to travel and do it in the way that I want? That might make you think, I've got to start saying no, or I've got to start drawing back from that as well. So I think both are really, really key points for people to consider. So thank you for putting those sort of hats on and sharing some advice about it. And I'm sure in a lot of your writing as well, Charlie, both about minimalism and also your journey, I'm sure there's some other golden nuggets like that in your writing on Substack and Medium as well. So I'll share the links to those on the when we put this episode out. I'm going to go back, Sam, to something you said, which resonates with me, because LinkedIn, which I spend my nearly every hour of my waking life on, unfortunately, is filled with pictures of digital nomads sitting on beaches, sitting in coffee shops in different countries with laptops on their laps, and they do kind of, there are some people on LinkedIn that give very sort of warts and all overviews or insights into that life. We've talked about the sort of positives of it. What have been, and I will ask this to both of you, but maybe Sam, I'll start with you. What have been the biggest challenges, you would say, from being digital nomads and adopting that lifestyle?
I think something that we've thought about quite a bit is and Charlie's written about this very much more eloquently than I'll convey now, but the sort of illusion of freedom when it comes to travel a little bit, I think. I think sometimes you'd have this idea that you can go anywhere and do whatever you want, but there's actually a lot of constraints around this. So, for example, visas. So Croatia until 1st of January was not in the Schengen area, which meant that any time that we spent there didn't count towards our time in the rest of the Schengen area, but now it does. So we now have more of a difficult time juggling how we spend our time without overstaying anywhere. You have the difficulty of sometimes two places that you think should be really well connected are really not well connected, and you think, how the hell am I going to get from here to there? And you've already booked the accommodation in that other place, and it turns out to be really difficult. So I think the sort of visas and like just the logistics of travel can be really time consuming. There are times when we've spent days trying to find the right apartment or the right flights, and it really eats into your time, either your work time or your leisure time, and it can be very distracting, knowing, oh God, this apartment finishes in a week's time, we haven't got anything lined up afterwards, and we don't know where we're going to go. And that sort of thing can be it can really weigh on your mind, and it can be really suck the time out of your day. So just those sort of logistical, legal side of things, I think can be a little bit difficult to.
Yeah. Okay, Charlie. What about you? Would you? I guess you'd echo a lot of what Sam said.
Yeah, he took my point. but yeah, and as Sam said, there's an illusion of freedom that can be very difficult, and something we've had these really unusual situations. Unique to when we started to travel. For instance, COVID meant that there was so much uncertainty about whether you could travel or not. But everything was cheap, which was good. And then COVID finished and everything got horrifically expensive. So this year in particular has been awful to try and find anything that we can afford, from flights to accommodation. Flights, I mean, we have to go back to the UK now to pick up our visa. It's going to cost us nearly €1,000 to do that, just for 2 flights and a couple of nights in a Manchester hotel. And because it's all this, but it's even worse than it used to be. So I think there's all those sort of constraints, and they can get quite difficult. And that sort of uncertainty, like I don't mind uncertainty to a certain extent, but when it's completely out of your control, and you are trying to get somewhere, and all the apartments are full, or you're like, why is it so expensive for hotels? It turns out there's a big festival on that weekend that you happen to be in this place, or you turn up and it's a bank holiday that you didn't know about, because the Europeans have so many bank holidays. And everything's shut, and it's just those. It's very boring, but that logistics stuff. But thankfully, there's stuff that we haven't had problems with that a lot of people have, like loneliness. Like a lot of digital nomads worry about loneliness. We have not had so much of that issue, but sometimes we do. I remember sitting in Albania in January this year, and we booked up for a month. And we didn't know anybody in Albania, and we thought that would be fine, but we were starting to get lonely, and we left 10 days early because we needed to just go see people that we knew. So sometimes I can see how that can be a big problem for people. Yeah,
that might be it might sound a little counterintuitive because you're together, but your own. I guess as a couple, you still look, a big part of life, isn't it? It's about interacting with other people outside your unit as well, which is obviously works incredibly well. But loneliness can still impact you, even if you're traveling with someone else. You still need those other touch points with friends.
We still need those interactions and those friends. You can't just have just the two of us and never speak to another human being for a month on end. You need.
I could turn into an incident like The Shining if you end up like that. It's you do start to be like, I need you to leave now.
Well, that's it. It's all part of a healthy relationship, isn't it? Time apart and having your own endeavours and doing your own stuff as well. So, okay, right. Well, thank you for that. I think we're going to wrap up now. So I just want to say thank you so much for your time. There is one closing tradition. You might have listened to a fairly well-known podcast. The host of that podcast gets a previous guest to ask the current guest a question that they've already written down. I don't do that on my podcast. I actually get my mum to ask the question. So I don't. But the thing is, I don't listen to the question beforehand. So mum has asked the question. She knows that I'm speaking to you. She doesn't know you personally, but she knows the gist of the conversation. And I've asked her to do a question. I play it down the mic. Let me know if you can't hear it. Here we go.
Hi, Charlie and Sam. Could you tell me how all the travelling you've done has affected your relationship, either positively or negatively? Thanks very much.
That's my mum. That's Lisa. If you wanted to address that question, we kind of touched upon that a little bit earlier from a relationship perspective. But how has it? I mean, I would say is it affected your relationship more positively than negatively?
Oh wow! Thank you for the
Thanks,
question,
Mum.
Lisa. I think that's a really interesting one. I think like any endeavor, there's been times when it's been really good for us and times when it's been bad, and I think it's forced us to change the way we talk to each other sometimes. And I think sometimes when you're in stressful situations in travel a lot, we're often put into very unfamiliar territory. You can easily get lost, get ripped off, whatever like that. And I think giving each other a little bit of an easier time when it comes to that sort of thing, and just reminding yourself, that we're in a really tough situation and that we need to be on the same team. We often say that, like, we need to be on the same team when it comes to this thing and, work together. But yeah, just reminding ourselves that, this lifestyle gives us the opportunity to spend time together and gives us, the opportunity in the afternoon to go for a beautiful walk by the beach or something like that, and to spend time outside of just business and work and all the other sorts of things. So I think overall it's made us really, I don't know, stronger, but I think our relationship has changed since leaving Vino Vero, and like we've found a little bit more, we've both spent more time together, but also, been doing slightly different things. So I think overall it has been a big benefit for it, but I think it's definitely been some challenges along the way as well.
Yeah, I always think that big things that happen in life, like travel, is never good or bad. It's never that binary. It's always something in between, and it ebbs and flows. And some days, we don't want to be anywhere near each other. Some days it's not like that at all. It's just life, I guess. It's the same as any life, I think. It's the same as just being at home and having 2 office jobs and going along with life like that. That ebbs and flows. So I always think of it as that sort of an ebb and flow. I do have a very good tip from a friend around traveling with your partner. I think everybody can use. Which is to have a thing where on travel days, because travel days are always the most stressful day, always. Like, I don't even know why, like, all you're doing is going from an airport from Porto to the UK and going home. It's still the most stressful thing. We shower each other. And I had some advice once, which was just basically always forgive what gets said on the travel day at the end of the day. Don't hold it. Whatever got said on a travel day, at the end of the day, you go, that was it. That was the travel day. Let's just leave that there, and don't hold any grudges around what you say when you're about to get on the plane.
I think that is a really great rule for anyone that's travelling anywhere, and especially given we're recording this during August and it's the summer holidays, and maybe people that are travelling with kids as well. Yeah. they're going to go through all sorts of different stress, so that might actually resonate with a lot of people. But guys, thank you so much for your time today. It's been I know the conversation would inspire so many people. It may just unanswered questions that people have in their head about the lifestyle that you've been brave enough to, because I do think there's a hell of a lot of bravery about turning your back on something that is really well established in the business and then making this leap. And I was inspired when I heard you were doing it. I was gutted that you were leaving Lee, because I really loved working with you guys as well. So it's been lovely to catch up. But yeah, there's no doubt this is going to inspire people that may be on the fence about taking or making these kind of decisions as well. And hopefully it's convinced some businesses out there to give their people some more flexibility as well. So thank you so much. Thanks for listening to Jobsworth. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to like and subscribe. You can stay connected by following me on LinkedIn for more insights on the world of work, behind the scenes content, and updates on upcoming episodes. We're already thinking about guests for season 2, so if there is a particular topic you'd like us to discuss, then please send in your suggestions to hello@jobsworth.com.